love NPR, I love public media, I love everything that it's done. Not the best business people in the world. So I was thinking like maybe we could apply sort of like some we could maybe if we took business lessons from sort of outside of the world of public media and sort of applied them to the same creative force that we have inside the world of public media, we could grow the economic pie. So I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go try to raise money. And if my argument was, if you look at the top podcasts out there, they're all sort of from the NPR world. I know how to do that. Podcasts are coming to the car. There's going to be a button in your car where you can play podcasts. I had all these statistics and stuff. And what I decided to do was do a podcast about trying to start this business. That podcast became Startup, started the business in the summer of 2014, and launched the Startup podcast in September of 2015. So almost exactly a year ago today. And what I ended up documenting, though, was this. I thought it was going to be sort of a publicity stunt, but I ended up documenting a surprisingly emotional journey. And so I'm just going to play you a couple of clips from that. So the first episode began with me pitching an investor, a guy named Chris Sacca. So Chris Sacca is like, it's sort of like saying, you know what, I've never painted anything in my life, and I'm going to learn how to paint, and I'm going to go talk to Jeff Koons. Or like, I'm gonna resuscitate the ghost of Pablo Picasso and then get him to teach me lessons. It's like sort of a crazy thing. It's a crazy place to start. And so but I didn't know that because I'd met him through a story, so I had sort of this weird access to him that most people wouldn't have had. So I went and pitched him, and I thought it was going to be all great. Ended up not working out so well. So I'm just going to play you a little clip from that pitch. Part of the problem was we met at this sushi restaurant in LA. And I had my little deck with my little laptop, and then he was like, and I was getting ready to show it to him, and then he was like, yeah, actually, let's take a walk. And so I was like, but my laptop. He was like, a pitch deck is a crutch. Let's just take a walk. So we're out on Pico Boulevard, like walking under underpasses, and I'm trying to pitch him, and I have my microphone, and I'm recording the whole thing. And needless to say, it didn't go so well.
You got to tighten up your story. We'll start again.
Yeah.
So you've now kind of meandered really tight this time. How you're going to make money doing this?
So you make money a combination. So there's three major revenues streams. I start again. I meander my way through the ad rates, Planet Money. At a certain point, I find myself deep into an explanation of my friend's successful Kickstarter project. Chris interrupted.
You lost track of your own outline.
Yeah, I did.
What you haven't given me is the outline of your story, right? Uh-huh. If I were calling an Uber right now and it said it's going to be here in 2 minutes, and that was all the time you had, what are you doing?
So I'm making a network of digital podcasts that we will monetize. That is going to meet. Sorry. Okay. Didn't go so well. So I soldiered on. But like so that was episode 1. I would like to say there weren't that many episodes like that, but there were a lot of episodes like that. Episode 2, episode 3, episode 4. But as I was going through this, I realized like, oh, this isn't just a publicity stunt to try to get people sort of like, I had all these listeners at Planet Money and This American Life that sort of maybe knew my work, but I couldn't bring with me because I couldn't, hijack their podcast feeds and direct them to myself. So I had to like sort of generate some publicity about myself to sort of get a listener base for this new company that I was starting. And so that was the original idea of this. But then as I was in it, I was realizing, oh no, this is a story that people think they know, but they don't actually know. Like business formation is something that's happening all the time. But like the story that gets told is so just the top surface of like, dude, we're killing it, or like whatever. Yeah, our startup didn't fail, but I got another idea. Whatever. It's like there's none of the actual things that are actually interesting about it, and even things that you wouldn't think that were interesting, like coming up with the name of your company. it was surprisingly complicated and crazy, and there was like all these legal hurdles, and sort of the trademark registration process is insane, and it's this weird emotional thing. And so like we'd gone through like 5 different names. We'd hit on them that we liked, and then they would get rejected with the trademark search, or like whatever. We'd like somebody else would decide, no, we can't name it that. Anyway, so we'd been doing it for months and months and months. And finally, my co-founder, Matt, and I were like at his house one day, and we were like we went down this sort of like foreign, like maybe we name it a foreign name, like what's Italian for sound? And then we're like, no, that's lame. And then we sort of somehow hit on Esperanto, and we came up with a name that we really liked. And then I went home and I shared that name that we really liked. We were like, this is the one. And we'd been sort of drinking through the afternoon, and we were like totally like by the end, we're like, yes, this is it. So I came home that afternoon and I shared it with my wife.
Orello.
Orello? Orello. What is that supposed to mean?
Well, it's ear in Esperanto.
That's so dumb.
So dumb, it's good though, right?
What? Whose idea was that?
It came up organically.
How does that come up organically?
I was like,
Speaking Esperanto?
So it wasn't all just fun and laughs. But the other thing that was really crazy about it, and so part of it was just sort of mining all these like weird things and sort of like putting it out there, like all the things that like what I realized is that like a lot of times the startup narrative gets told, it's told in retrospect, in hindsight, with all the bad parts cut out. And so what I was trying to do was put the bad parts in. Because I felt like, and I had this belief that like if people had ever been through anything close to like this process, probably most people had some of these same feelings. And so everything that was really uncomfortable or embarrassing, I tried to document. And by far, one of the most uncomfortable, embarrassing things that you can do when you're starting a business is decide on how much of the business you own and how much of your co-founder owns. And that's the equity discussion. You have to have it, and you feel like a douchebag having it. First of all, you're like arguing about, first of all, you have to sort of say, well, I own this much and I own this much, and that's weird. And also, you're talking about owning nothing, because nothing exists yet, but you have to do it before anything exists, because if you don't, then it gets worse later. So you have to sort of like pretend like you have this big, valuable company, even though all you have is an idea that you can't even come up with a name for. So, this is like literally the most probably embarrassing thing I've ever recorded about myself. I don't know if it'll read exactly as embarrassing right away, but when I hear it, I cringe. But this is me and my partner, Matt, trying to decide how much equity we would own. And the backstory is I came up with the idea of the company. Matt joined a little bit later as sort of like I needed a business partner, and he had business experience. And so he and I had talked and really liked each other, and we'd finally arrived at this moment. But I was coming to it from thinking like, this is my idea, you're joining, you're coming along for the ride. He was leaving a big, huge job to take a pay cut to zero to join, so he wanted to be compensated fairly. So this is our conversation.
When I look at the breakdown, I'm thinking of like high 40s to low 50s, so like a 47, 53, or something in that range.
Right.
all right. I was afraid you were going to say that. So the way I've been thinking about this is sort of like I've been talking to various people about like what would be a fair situation, various people have told me various things, but nobody.
People.
Like the highest anybody really got was like 10, 12% in terms of what they thought. I was arguing people up, basically.
I can't imagine doing this for the numbers that you're talking about. I just can't imagine doing it. 10% is just not, like, I can't give this what it needs of me at that level.
So, it's so horrible listening to that. I sound like such a dick, and and I'm wrong. As we eventually got to, like, we got to a much more equitable split, 60-40, which we ended up both feeling very good about. But like that sort of thing, every time we would put out an episode, I was thinking like, okay, this is going too far. We've shared too much. This is too horrible. Like, people will turn on me. This is a hateful thing to document anyway. like I'm starting a business. Come on. And then everybody, and like it's already. And so far, I've managed to trick people that it's not hateful. And now they were going to realize that I'm an awful person. But I just felt like there was something valuable to sort of revealing those parts of the process as well. And then every time we would do it, like, it would just get like, I went through that too. You know, so many people would sort of like come forward. So that was just really, really, so there was a couple lessons. First of all, like, going for the pain that you're going through, like, and trying to share that helps. The other thing that I learned, and I'm going to speed through because I'm running out of time, so you're going to hear a weird little audio glitch because I'm going to speed through something. But the other thing I learned is that doing a podcast about how bad you are at selling your idea ends up helping you sell your idea. So we actually ended up raising $1.5 million in seed funding to start this company. And the vast majority of it was raised after the startup podcast went on the air. That surprised me. My plan was, I'm going to raise the money, and then I'm going to start doing the podcasts. But the money raising was going so slow, we were like, well, let's throw up the podcast anyway. We might as well do that while we're going along. And that became the thing that sort of really sealed the deal. And I was confused about that in the beginning, and then I sort of realized what was going on. I think this is a lesson for any of you out there who are trying to start your thing. You're battling. When you're trying to get people, like, I had a pretty good track record. Like, I'd won awards. I was pretty well known in the field. Like, I thought that I could go to people and say, look, I've done this thing, and I just want to do it more. Give me the money. And people want a little bit more than that. And so I kept on trying to explain to them, and they were like, podcast, Wayne's World. And it's just sort of like this, nobody could get it. And so what I realized is when I did this podcast and it got a little bit of attention and people started listening to it and it would sort of climb the charts in iTunes, it became an example of the thing we were trying to explain. And it's one thing to say, I'm going to make a podcast of narrative podcast full of humor and pathos, and people are like, yeah. But then when I actually did it, and they're like, oh, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I want to fund that. And that was the thing that sort of like, I think, turned people. So to me, I would have started that process earlier. I would have gotten that thing up and running earlier. I would have just, instead of trying, you're never going to explain the thing as well as you can show them the thing. So like, that's definitely a lesson to take away. So now we have 3 shows up and running: Startup, Reply All, Mystery Show. We have a couple more on the way. Where we are now, we're like, we have a total audience of almost $2 million. Our revenue in the first year was $2 million because of like insanely high ad rates, which after listening to Heather's talk, we really, really need to figure out a second revenue stream. And we're at 24 employees and probably growing. And I'm gonna another weird audio glitch as I get to my last slide. So one of the things, and then I just want to talk, I was going to turn about lessons, but like screw the lessons. Here's the thing that I'm most excited about doing this thing. And it's going to be, and I'm going to just play you this.
You know, I have a weird
PJ
rash on my
said
foot.
we need
We're not gonna
to-
get-
Okay. The thing I'm most excited about is when you start a business, you sort of think you think this is, maybe this will happen, maybe this will happen. And at this point, a year into it, I am now starting to see things that I never could have imagined happening happen. And that is the most exciting thing. And the example of that is from the show Reply All. They performed here last night. Hopefully some of you got to see them. It's an amazing show about the internet. DJ Vogt is right there. Alex Goldman somewhere in the audience. I don't see him. Alex, are you around? I can't see you anyway, sorry. Oh, he's in the back. But they were the first show that we launched after a startup, and they were in it from the very beginning, and we didn't know what we were doing.